What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla stock, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Thursday, May 9th. Alright guys, Tesla stock here today down $3.09 a share. That's minus 1.74% in regular trading hours. Let's take a look at this thing here today. We're going to, of course, take a look under the hood at the volume profile, see if we can pull out any bias of today's intraday movement. Because we did see that big dump off, really all of it happened pre-market, and then intraday we saw a bit of a recovery and consolidation. Of course, we have some reports of the Musk FSD investigation. They're trying to catch some of the comments made by Musk as fraud, I suppose. So, a lot of that gets recovered off the open. So we'll take a look at the underlying volume profile, kind of peel back the onion and take a peek. Now, we'll also look at the psychological levels, implied volatility, particularly important if you are trading options, and then the expected move and tomorrow's directional bias coming out of the chain. So listen, let's get started here today, starting on the 5-minute chart. Okay, we'll take a quick look at that volume profile. Listen, by the way, if you are new here, Tesla's a daily upload, hits every single day, 1 hour after the market closes. So my goal here is to hit 10,000 subs. We can do it, but not without your help, so I greatly appreciate it. And I'll keep the Tesla videos coming. So first thing I want to show you guys here is that pre-market, when we saw the majority of that downside movement, yes, we saw volume pick up a little bit compared to what is normal in pre-market, but it was still a little bit lower than essentially, well, you could argue that it met the lowest volume of the intraday session. Okay, so I would take that with just about as much legitimacy as you would take the lowest volume portion of the intraday session, okay, which is not nearly as much as perhaps the higher volume portions of the day. And the fact that this recovery occurred after the fact, after that information, we already had that information, right? I do think that that's worth considering. Now, here off the open, we had a pretty contextual volume dump off the open. That's very normal. We saw volume hold on a little higher than what is typical, a little deeper into the day than what is normal. Typically we'll fade a little bit deeper here into like this kind of volume a little bit earlier. But the truth is there's not really incredibly obvious bullish bias that sticks out like a sore thumb during that upside move that we saw off the open, the recovery. Right now, what I'm really looking for is like tremendous volume on this move. And then as the stock pulls back, or the ETF, I suppose. I'm sorry. The stock. I was just looking at RK, of course, Tesla's their biggest holding. So if we look here, if volume were to dump off as Tesla pulls back and then it comes back in like crazy, volume pours back in on the upside move, that would be like a breathe and go style volume profile where it's really obvious that you're seeing a lot of bets being made on the upside move. People shy away when the stock's pulling back because not a lot of people are betting on that downside break. And then it pours back in once that confirmation bias comes. And we're just not really seeing that. Okay, so let's move on through the day. You start to see volume pour off and then a really normal close, actually kind of an underwhelming close. And this big red bar, that's not going to be a lot of movement. That's just the rebalancing bar. So a lot of buying and selling hitting kind of all at the same time through algorithms. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, when it was, I know that we saw some recovery intraday, but when it was all said and done, the stock was still down just under 2%. So, bulls, I wouldn't be all that upset that there's not tremendous bullish bias because the reality is the expectation is that on a nearly 2% red day, you would see at least some bearish bias. So the fact that we're not really seeing any is not horrendous for if you're a bull and not ideal if you're a bear. So let's move on and take a look at those self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels here on Tesla. The big money's paying attention, so we also need to know what's going on here. And you can see that not a lot here changed today. All that did change is we saw a big move out of the 50 period, moving downside bears. That is what you guys wanted to see. We talked about this yesterday. Getting that downside adds an additional lower descending layer of potential resistance, which is great if you're a bear. But the truth is we haven't seen a test of it yet, so we really don't know how that's going to react. So tomorrow, if you are bearish and we see a retest of the 50 period, you're going to want to see that reject on high volume being treated as resistance. Whereas if you're bullish, the ideal scenario is to end up back in a position where we're above both moving averages while they're both ascending, treating the 50 as support. How do we get there? Ideally reclaiming both, if not at least just one. It's about a 1.5% move upside just to reclaim or at least test that 50 period as of right now. That's likely to be a little bit different by tomorrow as this comes even lower. But bulls ripping upside through the 50 period on high volume, giving it a bit of a retest on lower volume, and then bouncing on high volume is really ideally what I'm looking for tomorrow. That can set us up for a test of that 200 period here on the 30-minute chart. So the 4-hour chart, you can see we were kind of saved actually today by the 200 period. You can see that we tested it and bounced off the open. And that now puts us kind of halfway in between this channel between the 200 period and the 50 period. So listen, bears, any upside test of the 50 period, you want to see that reject. Any downside test of the 200 period, you want to rip downside through and reclaim that as resistance. Bulls, the 200 period is currently a level of potential support. We saw that today. Any retest, you'd like to see a repeat bounce. Okay, whereas really the goal is to get up back above the 50 period here on the 4-hour chart. Now the daily is by far the most important, so let's take a look. You can see here that we kind of rode right on top today of that 50 period, or I suppose the 50-day moving average since we're on the daily chart. That's a very heavily watched moving average. The daily is a really heavily watched chart. So listen guys, tomorrow's a really simple story here on Tesla. Tomorrow's the battle of the 50-day moving average, realistically. Bulls, I don't want to give up that 50, ideally. And bears, the goal is to reclaim the 50 as resistance. Okay, because we're starting from above, right? So bulls, we need to hold that as support. We really haven't proved a lot yet. I would like to prove that more tomorrow. Whereas bears, it's time to get beneath there, start treating that as a resistance area like we've been seeing we had been seeing for a while prior to this reclaim. Now, implied volatility compared to the last month or so, if we look back here, couple of months really, you can see that still in a very low range. It fell again today, okay? IV crush, if you're experiencing that, here's the culprit. If you're looking to buy new options, it's never a bad thing to pay less Vega value up front. This offers that, okay? Now, expected move. Let's take a look at that. So the next expiration we have is, of course, Friday, May 10th. The expected move by Friday's close compared to today's close is plus or minus $5.28 per share. So what we can do here is take that number, divide it by 2 trading days, and then add back 50% or so. As we head into the end of the week, and there's only 2 trading days left, the reason we add back, or at least in this market, I'm adding back 50%, is to make up for the fact that that first number assumes a red streak or a green streak into the end of the week. But when we only have 2 variables, like 2 trading days, adding back 50 might be a little heavy. So we end up with if we do it that way, we end up with plus or minus $3.96 of potential movement being expected by the market by tomorrow's close. However, I'm going to say between about $3 and $4 plus or minus is the expected move being priced in by the market, because when you only have 2 trading days left, you're dealing with less variables, right? So adding back 50%, again, might be a little bit heavy. That's the guesswork that is required of us here, because we don't have the luxury of daily expirations. So we have to read a little bit between the lines, but that's part of trading, and whoever does the best job of that is the most successful, realistically. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's the volatility expectation. That's helpful for trading options and I suppose shares, but what about directional bias? Well, the volume today, we had 1.75 million total contracts traded, 787,000 calls, 963,000 puts, a slight bearish bias on the overall call put ratio. But take a look at this. If we break this down by the short-term speculators, right, that 0 to 20 delta range, it flips 344,000 calls and about 215,000 puts. So we're seeing actually a bullish bias out of the short-term speculators and a slight bearish bias on that overall, which of course the overall is going to include more of the mid and long-term bets being placed just today as well. Listen, if you're getting value out of the daily Tesla uploads, I ask you to do one thing. It's very quick. It's free. Leave a like on the video and then get out of here and enjoy your day. Listen, I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.